again. Don't worry about the mask. I've just been trying to prepare for my job interview as a surgeon. Do you think they mistake the nunchuck for a stethoscope? I better put on some contacts just to be safe. I know this may look silly, but come on, give me a break! After my recent falling out with Target, I've been trying to look into other fields of study, and the only reason why I have any kind of experience with medicine is because of that. Wait, you don't know what that is, do you?
In case it wasn't obvious, I like video games. In other words, I'm a bit of a nerd. See, I went through this phase in 2015 where I watched any video game content I could find on YouTube. Didn't matter what game it was, if buttons were being pressed, so are my eyes. As a result, there are many games that I remember watching walkthroughs of from start to finish without even actually playing the games themselves. While these backseat experiences were entertaining and fun, even now I still long to give those games a shot, regardless of what had been spoiled for me. And no other game truly made me feel that way more than the Trauma Center series.
Oh man, it sounds like a brief history lesson's coming.
Trauma Center is a series of surgery simulation games, 5 games to be exact. It started out in 2005 on the DS before getting a remake for the Wii, a sequel on both the Wii and DS, and then falling off right after one last swan song for the Wii as Atlas slowly began to head into a bit of a Persona craze. As for me, I only got introduced to the series after seeing it on Let's Play channels like Corinne's channel, Surefire Tactics, and Slicer. Now I would like to talk about all of these games today, but since I don't have this, or this, I think I'm gonna have to start off a bit unconventionally.
Trauma Center's second opinion for the Wii. It's not exactly the very first title in the series, but rather a remake of Under the Knife, the very first title. From what I could tell, the fanbase considered this remake to be faithful enough that you could play either or and move on, as opposed to needing to play both. I'm still going to cover the original in due time, don't worry.
After the success of Under the Knife, producer Katsura Hashino formed a development team within Atlas called the Caduceus team. Just a handful of people, but they were considered Atlas's most enthusiastic gamers, the perfect men to undergo crunch as the remake began development in January of its release year, 2006. I hope they got their due thanks. They took this chance to not just do Under the Knife again, but add in new stuff to justify the existence of a remake. More on that later, I promise. Second Opinion was officially revealed in May at E3 as a launch title for the Wii via a poster. At least that's what the sources I could find say. This allowed customers to choose between Excite Truck, Legend of Zelda, Twilight Princess, or 18 other games that fell into obscurity or received mixed reviews shortly after release.
I got Cars.
As a result, the game was released in November 19th in North America, December 2nd in Japan, both alongside the Wii's launch in their respective countries, August 10th, 2007 in Europe, and I am so sorry if you are a Trauma Center fan living in Australia. While the game sold poorly and anywhere but the US, nearly everyone that played it was pretty enthusiastic about the game. Some were skeptical about how well a touchscreen based game would convert over to the Wiimote and Nunchuck, but the concerns were drowned out fairly quickly as the game upon release was still a success both among the players and the critics, some of which saying that it was an essential game to have for the Wii.
This game got some pretty high praise upon release, but I think it's about time that I actually show you what it's like to play the game. It'll be good practice for the interview.
Before popping the disc in, I gotta say, this box art is definitely box art. Interesting series of characters to feature on the box, since one's a spoiler and half the cast down here probably wouldn't have been my personal first pick to be on the front. Without spoiling too much, I think these 3 could fit here better than these 3. Looks very cheap too though, just 7 character portraits, the logo, and what's probably an edited screenshot from one of the game's levels. Half the cast looks confused. It's not like it looks bad, I still think it kinda looks neat, but considering a big chunk of the people playing this at the time likely already experienced Under the Knife, I feel like this front cover was a missed opportunity to make something really cool without fear of spoiling the story. Again, this guy's a spoiler. Turn over to the back and we're told this game turns our living room into an OR. It basically tells us everything that's going to be new in this remake, such as the new doctor that'll be added into the story, Dr. Weaver. Like for the Wii.
That's cute.
Open the sucker up and oh my gosh. The instruction booklet, such a beautiful thing that every kid read until it stopped being a thing. We get an introduction to the cast, the controls, literal world building. We even get to learn some medical terminology. Now I know what a lobectomy is. In the year 2018, mankind has overcome a number of diseases once thought incurable. Cancer, AIDS, and TIFTA are nearly things of the past.
If only that were true.
This is honestly a nice little treat. I'm having tons of fun and I haven't even popped the disc in. I said I'd do that 2 minutes ago, didn't I? Well, let's finally do it. This is Trauma Center Second Opinion. Jesus, we get a neat little opening. That is definitely showing its age. Hey, look, a dragon.
I'd say we're off to a pretty good start.
Alright, what difficulty do we want?
Hard.
Starting with Chapter 1, we meet Greg Casal and Mary Fulton, senior surgeon and assistant respectively at Hope Hospital, before getting introduced to this sad sack named Derek Stiles, who apparently is surprised that he, a surgeon, is going to operate.
What a dud.
He's also the main character we're going to be controlling for the story.
An amazing dud.
Chapter 1 is basically more of a tutorial chapter as we take things slowly, learning about all the surgical tools we'll have at our disposal. We've got the sutures that, by holding A and doing zigzags with the Wiimote's pointer, we can close up wounds. Forceps allow holding both A and B to remove foreign objects from the body and close up bigger wounds. Antibiotic gel to close up smaller wounds, disinfect areas, and quickly heal the patient bit with A. A scalpel allows us to make incisions and pry things out of the patient's organ with A. Our syringe helps us inject certain fluids in the patient. For now though, we've just got the legendary green goo. Give the patient's organ some of this with A and you'll be looking at a slightly healthier patient. The ultrasound allows us to move the camera at certain points and find foreign objects within the patient's organ with A. A drain allows us to...
What do you think?
With A. You may have noticed that all of these tools use the A button and wonder, well, how does that work? How does the game know what tool we want to use?
I knew the stethoscope would come in handy.
We can only use one tool at a time and switch them with the nunchuck's joystick, moving to a certain direction for certain tools. Looking at how Under the Knife controlled with just a stylus and a touchscreen, these two control schemes are very different but still have their own unique advantages. It may be easier to be precise with the stylus, but it's slower to switch tools. Meanwhile, it's the exact opposite for the Wiimote and nunchuck. Once you have the tools and their positions on the control stick memorized, you'll be moving pretty quick. That said, it really comes down to personal preference which control scheme you'd prefer, but I personally think it's fun ripping open a patient on Duracell batteries. There's just something about the...
Keep it steady.
when you... that just feels... oh, so good.
I am too excited to be a doctor.
Moving back to the story, Nurse Fulton's leaving.
Well, I just got to know you.
We're introduced to Dr. Hoffman, Hope Hospital's director, and after a brief surgery, Angie Thompson, the one who'll be replacing Fulton.
Well, I just got to know you.
After an awkward meeting, a lecture from Angie about how to reassure patients and learning how the laser works, again, press A. Derek ignores Angie's warning, allows a patient to almost die, and gets chewed out by Dr. Hoffman just because he wanted to meet at some symposium thing.
What a dud.
Angie hates us now, but a car accident gives us a chance to prove our skills as a doctor and earn her respect. Thank you for getting in that car accident, Omar. This is also where we're introduced to two things. First, the defibrillator, one of Second Opinion's many remake exclusive features. Push the Wiimote and nunchuck towards the patient and press both Z and B when the meter hits the green. It sometimes feels a bit finicky to push the defibrillator onto the patient, but thankfully it only gets used like, what, 3 times? As for the second thing, shapes. They'll be more relevant in the second chapter. Meanwhile, Dr. Weaver's repairing some poor sap's bones. Twisting the Wiimote to fit the bones in the right place felt stiff, but it was an interesting time. Overall, Chapter 1, while it starts off a bit slow, does properly teach us about everything we need to know about the controls and makes for a fair starting point. But what's up with the shapes? We learn in Chapter 2 that it's called the Healing Touch, an ability that only descendants of the Greek god of medicine Asclepius can use, allowing them to have superhuman powers that help during surgical operations.
Sure.
Hoffman discourages us from using it, but dang it, we get to draw stars! By holding the Z and B button, drawing 5 triangles and a pentagon, you'll be able to temporarily slow things down a bit, the duration depending on how fast and well drawn your star is. Very helpful if you're in a pinch. You can only use it 1 time per doctor per operation though, so if you're going to use it, make sure this is the time. Moving on, we meet Linda Reed, who got very badly scratched in the lungs, but not on the exterior. How do you even do that? Turns out she doesn't want to live. She gets mad at us, Angie tells her to die.
Thank you, Angie. Very helpful.
Derek gives Linda a pep talk. Linda wants to live. Cool. Angie apparently heard some rumors about a death doctor, referring to euthanization, but forget about that for now, because the reason why Linda got all scratched up was because of this. The dragon we saw in the intro cutscene.
Rats.
This is Kiriaki, or Teriyaki, one of the 7 forms of guilt. It's relatively simple. Just look for it with the ultrasound, scalpel it out, and laser it to death. Alright, we've saved Linda.
Nice.
Angie lets Dr. Casal know that her currently missing father researched guilt. That is definitely not concerning. Thanks to his skills at treating the little dragons, Derek and Angie prepare to be transferred to Caduceus, the hospital spearheading the war against guilt. Right after Derek gives a quick backstory dump about his dead dad. While this chapter spends a good chunk of its runtime getting you used to the healing touch, it was pretty touching to help Linda out and develop Derek a bit more. Meanwhile, it gets revealed to us that Dr. Weaver also had the healing touch and her name is actually Naomi Kimishima.
But the pun was so cute.
Naomi's healing touch doesn't slut on time, but brings the vitals back up whenever you do anything remotely good, which is pretty much what this remake exclusive power is.
Good.
We go to Caduceus for Chapter 3, meeting even more characters. Sydney, Dr. Casal's brother, Richard Anderson, the executive director, Stephen Clarks, chief surgeon, Cybele Myers, former police officer nicknamed Iron Vixen, and finally Tyler Chase, Derek's friend from med school.
Oh, small world.
Tyler is revealed to be the death doctor Angie heard rumors about. He and Derek have an argument about the ethics of euthanization after it's revealed that Tyler's little sister, Amy, has a brand new strain of guilt.
Rats.
This is Deftera, the second strain. These are the tumors, strain the little red and blue guys when they combine, and use the antibiotic gel to make sure that the same colored bodies stay away from each other, as they'll be making more tumors if they combine. After enough drainage, they'll get really mad and hurt the patient pretty badly, so be sure to carve them out before things get bad. They're pretty annoying to deal with and are a tad bit luck-based when two sets together, but we saved Tyler's sister anyways.
Nice.
After briefly meeting Victor Nagel, head of the research division, Derek is sent with Cybele to the international conference to share his knowledge about guilt so far. At the conference, we learn that guilt is being spread by Delphi, a group whose motive is unknown at the moment, but forget about that, there's a bomb and we gotta defuse it.
Man, being a doctor is tough.
Interesting change of pace, but you know what, it wasn't that bad. With no room to breathe, we're going to Africa.
Why not?
After a brief but casual operation on the plane, we land in Africa and find a Delphi hideout with Langston Miller, director of Caduceus' Europe branch. And we have the help of a young boy named Ruben to thank. He gets a new strain of guilt shortly after.
Rats!
Widely considered the harshest guilt to treat by many among the Trauma Center fanbase, Treaty is weird. I can't really disagree with them either. The characters kinda explain how you're supposed to deal with it, but at the same time kinda leave you hanging in terms of what to do. Thankfully, I've managed to figure it out. Plug out the sticks and ensure that if you're ever removing a pizza slice, know what the slice has 2 sticks in it, at least for the ones that have room to grow and aren't on the outskirts of the organ. Every so often, a stick will spew some bluish gas when you pull it. It gives you a fair amount of time to slurp it though, so just do it when you get the chance. Don't go out of your way for it. If you still can't handle Treaty, a good healing touch will do. Ruben is saved.
Nice.
Meanwhile, Naomi is busy operating in the dark with a pen light and a camera flash. Honestly, a really fun operation. It's really interesting how just simply limiting your visibility really intensifies the situation. After going through that chapter, I think I liked it. Kind of felt more like 3 mini chapters sewed up into one bigger one. It really helped to make the chapter feel more fulfilling than it probably actually is. Delphi and Treaty can be annoying, but they're pretty cool. Chapter 4, looks like Dr. Casal's got a new strain of guilt.
Rats!
After a brief endeavor to collect this new strain's fluids, we create a serum that allows us to fight against it.
Oh, thank goodness.
I'm a bit mixed on Tatardi. You gotta inject the liquids into these things with their corresponding colors. It's not terrible, but with their movement sometimes being a bit janky, and you have to use a syringe on 2 AA as fast as possible. This is basically a name training minigame with a tumor thrown in there too. Casal saved, but now Mr. Anderson's got guilt.
Not rats!
We spend the rest of the chapter with Victor, the butcher Kyoto, the guy who's a tsundere but towards the world, not us. After opening up Anderson, doing some experiments and some puzzles,
I am a real doctor.
we finally make a special laser to face off the now named Pempty strain. And it's a joke. Literally just hold the E button on that thing and the mini bodies that spawns, treat any extra wounds that they cause along the way. It was kinda neat to play around with it, but the final encounter for me was just a little bit of a letdown. Probably would have been a bit more interesting had the laser actually had a cooldown like it, and basically all the other tools have at pretty much every other point in the game, but Mr. Anderson is safe,
Nice.
but he dies shortly after.
Well, that blows.
Meanwhile, Naomi does a kidney transplant.
Oh?
Chapter 4 was okay. That's kind of all I have to say. Nah, it was really touching to really understand the bond between Dr. Hoffman and Mr. Anderson, and I really like how we got to mess around with the strains before having an actual face-off against them. It was a nice way of preparing us for the grand encounter. But Tatardi and Pempty are probably the most boring guild strains to deal with. The former is basically just target practice, while the latter is not even that. It's just constantly holding A, moving the pointer a bit for some tumors, or just suturing like, 1 or 2 cuts. Delphi headquarters speaking.
Do something!
Chapter 5 is where things really start to kick in high gear, as a sudden outbreak of guilt has us treating even stronger forms of the guilt we've been introduced to. We even have an operation where we treat multiple patients in one go. This part of the game is really fun, especially with how tense the situation gets. I promise you that's not masochism. After dealing with the outbreak and returning to Caduceus, somebody breaks in.
What are you trying to steal from a hospital? Stethoscopes?
They infect Cybele with a new strain of guilt.
Mice!
This is Paraskevi, personally my favorite one to fight amongst the bunch. They'll be trying their hardest to burrow into the organ and get into the heart. If they succeed, the victim's donezo. Laser their tails to stop them from doing that and cut them up into smaller pieces. Once they are small enough, you can force up them out. It's so fun trying to multitask between suturing the cuts, lasering them, cutting them, and ripping them out. That isn't to say that the other guilds are bad, but this is easily the most interesting one to fight against thus far, as the pace of the fight is entirely set by how confident you are in your speed and precision. If you could handle having 20 of these suckers running around, by all means, go for it. But if you want to take it slowly and rip it apart, it's totally within your right to do so. Cybele is saved.
Yes!
It's revealed that the intruder was Angie's father, Kenneth Blackwell.
Who would have known?
Maybe it's just me because I already knew the story from watching walkthroughs of it, but I think Angie's minor hint at Chapter 2 kinda made it obvious that he would be involved with Delphi somehow. Blackwell's hideout is located, Derek and Angie are allowed to go on the raid. Meanwhile, Naomi fights against Kiriki while avoiding killing any of these blue miscreants to get them out of the patient for research. She then gets to leave and even keeps the little guys she got from the patient. But a nice souvenir to keep. Going back to the raid and saving a researcher after a very stressful encounter with these little guys, we find Blackwell, Angie gets mad at him, and we learn that he has the last strain of guilt.
What a dud.
This is Savato, the final strain and the only one to carry multiple phases in its fight. Cut through the webs before they turn red and laser any of the little miscreants Savato spawns. After cutting through the web multiple times, lasering it for decades, cutting it 3 times, and injecting it with the special black goo, it'll run amok. 2 healing touches later, it is over. Honestly, another fun strain to fight against. While I liked how you get to control the pace against Paraskevi, Savato forces you to be fast and play by its own rules, but the fight will only progress if you're capable of not just keeping the patient alive, but managing your laser's cooldown as well.
And so ends Chapter 5. Honestly, a pretty great chapter. It really feels like the story's about to take off. And hey, with Blackwell in custody, all we gotta do now is find Delphi headquarters and finish off the war against guilt.
Chapter 6 starts off with a quick text blurb explaining how they raid Delphi's headquarters and save the children being held inside as hosts. Adam, the head honcho, is revealed and captured. The raid was successful and several months have passed since then.
I mean, it was just so much fun reading it. I wonder what it was like to play it.
I imagine it was probably due to time constraints that I was either experiencing the upcoming chapter or that Delphi raid, but I wish there was a way to experience both. Guess I'll have to come to you someday. Let's speedrun the ending. Chapter 6 has us going to Europe for a conference. We see Director Miller while getting acquainted with Dr. Elwin and finally getting Naomi in on the main story, but forget about that for now, Derek's got guilt.
Rats?
But we save it pretty easily. This operation is a personal favorite. Having to fight both Paraskevi and Kyriaki at the same time, sure, both are super easy to deal with at this point, and with the operation starting right at the heart, the situation is pretty tense. But fighting the two together honestly made it so much more engaging than I thought it would be. Turns out Caduceus Europe had created Z-cells, a really powerful medicine that regenerates the body much faster than any other medical procedure can. But Director Miller reveals to us that the medicine was based off of Adam's cells and the guilt research, so I wonder if you can tell what happens next. A guilt outbreak occurs.
Ah, great.
After dealing with we jump right into having to save 4 patients, flip-flopping between Derek and Naomi as the operating surgeon, so we'll have 2 healing touches at our disposal. Volunteers is tough. So tough I had to go back and actually practice a bit to ensure I was ready to take it on. Like I said, Paraskevi is fun to deal with, but man is it tense that it starts at the heart, and is a fully grown one, and is after dealing with 3 patients. 2 of which having Deftera and Treaty, but after getting through it, Dr. Hoffman gets a mutated strain of Savato, the final boss. It was alright. A little bit underwhelming if I may. With it being a mutated strain, I think it would have been more interesting had it been a bit more than just a souped up Savato. It's hard, no doubt, but I think it would have made for a fantastic final battle had all the tools been required for the operation. Just the very culmination of everything you've learned to use up until this point. It probably wouldn't have been too hard either. Maybe make it create a tumor like the ones we had to ultrasound and drain back in chapter 1. That would have been a nice curveball to throw our way. Honestly though, I find it hard to complain with just how amazing the music gets during this final operation. And so a doctor was born. In case it isn't obvious, Chapter 6 is my favorite in the game. With Dr. Hoffman saved, Caduceus Europe is investigated, guilt research becomes heavily restricted, and the war against it has finally ended. For now.
And that pretty much wraps up Trauma Center's Second Opinion. It wasn't perfect. I think some of the guilt strains could have benefited from being a little bit more complex to accommodate what the player knows by the point they're introduced. And there is a bit of a difficulty spike near the end. But like 90% of the time, it is a very fun experience. It doesn't make you feel intense while also remembering that you have to keep your cool. The music was pretty stellar. The story, while simplistic and does go through a bit of a slow burn in Chapter 4, was fairly touching and engaging throughout. I can also appreciate the themes are brought up regarding mankind and medicine. To put simply, I get the little bits of hype that this game got in 2006. It may not be perfect, but one could definitely argue that it is an essential experience to have on the Wii. It may be a very acquired taste, it's definitely not fun in the same sense that Mario or Zelda or Excite Truck can be fun, But I think that's also a good thing. It's a different type of fun, the kind of variety that needs to be appreciated. Because the game isn't even over yet.
After beating the game, you also get access to the X missions, basically just one more fight against each of the guilt strains on their own. But they're even more difficult, so difficult that the difficulty setting is set to extreme upon looking at them. As for the story reason, it's basically Naomi and Derek trying to completely finish off guilt by eradicating it from Adam's body. And if you want to get even more out of the game, you could always go back and try to get the highest ranking, as they'll boost the difficulty a fair bit.
Well, if I'm gonna pursue a career in the medical field, I guess I better beat all of them. Let's do this. I couldn't get past Pempty. I'll be back.